information. I want to bring in Mark Dubowitz, Chief Executive of Foundation for Defense of Democracies and an expert on Iran's nuclear program. Thank you for being here. CNN is learning that that target was not nuclear, but it is certainly close to a major nuclear facility. So what does the proximity of this attack to that facility mean to Iran tonight?
Well, there's two major facilities. One is actually in Isfahan, which is a uranium conversion facility. That's where Iran has a central process of converting yellowcake to uranium fluoroxide. And it's very important because that is then enriched. Also, the highly enriched stockpiles are actually contained at this Isfahan fabrication plant. So Iran's highly enriched material, which is used to be converted into weapons-grade uranium, is in Isfahan. And then 120 kilometers away is the Natanz enrichment facility, where the next essential stage towards weapons-grade uranium takes place. So this is a symbolic message to the Iranians. We can hit your nuclear facilities, but also we can penetrate your air defenses, and you are defenseless.
That's a striking notion. And I wonder, based on what the Iranian foreign minister has said, I mean, certainly, if the symbolism is not lost on you or any of us, it most certainly is not lost on the Iranian government. And how do you think they intend to respond? Is this bluster, his threats of it being immediate, a maximum level, and decisive? Or is there some meat on that bone?
Well, depending on, we're getting conflicting reports. I mean, some reports said actually playing down the nature and severity and strategic messaging of the Israeli strike. So we'll see what the response is. The other thing that I find interesting is if perhaps they did actually strike Iranian fighter jets in an air base, there would be some interesting symmetry. It'd almost be poetic, because the Iranians tried with their barrage of missiles and drones to strike an Israeli Air Force base in Nevatim and destroy Israeli F-35 fighter jets. So it would be a certain amount of symmetry if the Israelis then turned around, penetrated air defenses successfully, and destroyed Iranian fighter jets on the runway. I think that's, a certain amount of symbolism and symmetry that I think people would find interesting and perhaps even in some respects amusing.
And through the eyes of the Iranians, highly problematic. It seems to be quite a blow if they were not able to accomplish that which was done to them just days later. I wonder about this informational void that we're in right now, given that there are perhaps efforts to downplay the impact of Israel's attack in the region. The idea of wondering if they're going to really back up the words they've said. Is the world really at the mercy of Iran to give the information that has resulted, or do we have the ability to rely on these commercial or spy satellites to assess independent of what Iran tells the world?
Yeah, I've no doubt over the coming day or days, we'll find out more about exactly what happened. But I really do actually want to emphasize something that I think has not been discussed enough, and that is how vulnerable Iran may be if its air defenses don't work, because it's not just the nuclear sites, it's leadership assets, it's the headquarters of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the refineries and pipelines and ports. And so what Iran has done is it's ringed their valuable assets with air defenses. If they've just discovered today that their air defenses don't work, that is certainly a degree of vulnerability that must be giving pause to the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, and his Revolutionary Guards. If that's the case, their retaliatory decisions must be informed by that vulnerability, and they may be careful. They may decide to downplay it and stand down.
Does that mean that the world would now perhaps view Iran as less of a formidable threat in the region if they truly are that vulnerable?
Look, I mean, I've always said that the Islamic Republic of Iran is not 10 feet tall. This is not a superpower. This is not the United States facing off against the Soviet Union. We did that with thousands of nuclear tipped missiles aimed at our cities. Thank God right now, Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons, though they're close. I mean, 60% highly enriched uranium is 97% of what they need to get to 90% enriched uranium. So they're very close, and one must take note of that. They are a stone's throw from having nuclear weapons. But I think the Israelis are now demonstrating that they are willing to go after Iran's nuclear weapons program. And they have capabilities that may surprise the Iranians and surprise all of us. They've certainly been working on this for many, many years. And I think it's always been said to me by senior Israeli officials, if we don't surprise you when we go after those nuclear facilities, then we will fail. And so this may be an early demonstration of some new capabilities that Israel has and that the Iranians were not aware of.
Thank you so much for